Hey, how's it going? My name's Wyatt, I think. I'm kind of scatterbrained right now because I just sold my soul in order to get this game that I'm talking about today. It doesn't go for cheap on the market, and I'm kind of broke right now, so this was really the only thing I could do. But I really love EarthBound a lot, so I figure if I love it that much, is it really that bad of a thing to sell my soul for it? But if I sold my soul, am I even capable of loving it anymore? So what is EarthBound anyway? Contrary to the lies Nintendo fed us for years, this isn't even the first game in its series. The first game in the Mother series was released in 1989, but due to the nature of NES-era RPGs, I haven't actually played it yet and don't really intend to. EarthBound was the first and only game in the series to leave Japan until Mother was finally localized and released as EarthBound Beginnings on the Nintendo Wii U. Guess this thing was good for something after all. We don't talk about the third game though. It doesn't exist, and if anyone asks you about it, you should tell them exactly that. Now, for starters, let's talk about the story. EarthBound follows the journey of a kid named Ness who awakens to his psychic abilities. After being informed by a fly that he and 3 others need to save the world from an evil being named Gygus, he sets off on his journey to record the 8 melodies from the sanctuary scattered across the land, in hopes of stopping this evil. And that's about it. Without going too in-depth, that's pretty much all the story is. Clearly it's not a very story-centric game, but it doesn't have to be. The fun comes from the things that happen around the story. Fighting a gangster in the backyard of an arcade, freeing a cult obsessed with the color blue, stopping a zombie invasion with zombie paper, okay, and reuniting a black sesame seed with its long-lost lover, the white sesame seed, are only a handful of things that can happen on your way to these sanctuaries. If any of that interests you, then you should probably play this game. Now, we already talked about Ness, but let's talk about his 3 companions. Ness, Paula, and Pooh are all PSI users, which is more or less like the magic in other RPGs. Each character can also equip a melee weapon, of course, in case you don't want to use your PP, which honestly I could understand. Most of the bosses are pretty easy as long as you use your strongest PSI moves, so I went through most of the game not using PSI attacks on regular enemies. So let's talk about a handful of these moves. PSI Freeze is exactly what it sounds like. It'll probably be Paula's main attack for you, and it can freeze enemies sometimes. Fire hits all of the enemies in a single row, Thunder has a chance to hit multiple enemies, and Starstorm is where Pooh decides, frick the earth, and sends down the meteors that kill the dinosaurs. Now, different enemies are weak to different PSI attacks, but honestly, I never figured that out since I was always using physical attacks. Oh, and while we're on the topic of Pooh, I should mention that you can't buy weapons or armor for him like the other characters. He can only equip items meant for him that you'll find scattered across the world, all being named something of kings. I'd like to imagine that the dog, your pet dog in the game, isn't one of Pooh's weapons, and we just never found that out, because the canon name for the dog is King. So one of these items for Pooh is the Sword of Kings, one of the most famous items in the game because it has a 1 out of 128 chance of dropping from Starman Supers. But, newsflash, there's a weapon like this for each character. I only ended up getting the Sword of Kings and the weapon for Jeff, a character we haven't talked about for certain reasons. Now honestly, it's not like you have to get these weapons. I got through the game just fine without them. But if you're gonna grind for one and just one, I would go for the Sword of Kings, since it's Pooh's only weapon. Now, there were a few PSI moves I didn't talk about, and that was because they aren't attacking moves. Life Up heals the HP of a party member, Healing gets rid of status conditions, Magnet steals PP from the enemy, etc. There are plenty more I could talk about, but those are really the only ones I ever used, so... The last one I'll talk about is PSI Teleport. This is an ability you get from Pooh when he joins the party, and eventually Ness learns it as well. And basically, as long as you have enough running room, you can teleport to any town you've been to before. Now you may notice that I said there were 4 party members, but I only mentioned 3. So let's talk about Jeff. I held off on talking about him because he's entirely different from the other 3. He can't use PSI, and you also can't buy weapons for him. I mean, I guess you can, but not in the conventional way. You have to do some work for them. On your journey, you can find or buy items that start with the word broken. When you rest in a hotel, Jeff has a chance of fixing the broken item based on how high his IQ stat is. Weapon dealers will usually sell you broken guns that he can fix and then equip, because guns are his main weapon. Something to note is that Jeff can never miss of his own accord. If an enemy has higher evasion or something like that, then yeah, he can miss, but anytime he misses, just know it's not his fault. So don't get mad at him. So if Jeff doesn't have PSI, then what makes him special? I mean, for me, it was bottle rockets. You can buy bottle rockets, big bottle rockets, and later on, multi-bottle rockets from the arms dealers. And these things really pack a punch. I'd highly recommend having the strongest ones you can before a boss fight, because they'll be down in just a few hits if you use them along with the other character's PSI. Now, I want you to listen to me. At a certain point in the game, you will gain access to grenade launchers that Jeff can use. And unlike bottle rockets, you can use these infinitely. So, when you get a grenade launcher, don't even bother using Jeff's normal weapon, because you might as well just use the grenade launcher, because it's more powerful, and it's never going to break or anything like that. And I never learned about that weapon until after I already beat the game. Like, I didn't know, I was still using Jeff's regular moves. So PSA, take it from me. Use the rocket launchers. It'll help you out a lot. Alright, so I'm a guy who loves RPGs, but a lot of the time I don't end up finishing them. I end up getting under-leveled, or I'm just like not good at the game, which sucks because I love a lot of the stories in RPGs, so then I just have to resort to watching the cutscenes online. Well, if you're anything like me, you should have no problems with EarthBound. Most of the issues you might have will probably be at the beginning of the game, since you're low level and only have one character. In my opinion, the game only gets easier the further you go. Another advantage is that the battles are somewhat real-time. I don't mean like Final Fantasy VII Remake style, which is actually the game I was thinking of when I said I don't finish a lot of RPGs that I love. But when you get hit, it doesn't automatically take the correct amount of HP away. You see the HP physically go down over time, which means if you're hit with a mortal blow, you still have time to heal up rather than just instantly dying. Now, you shouldn't get underleveled at all throughout the game as long as you aren't skipping enemies. What do I mean by that? Well, let's start with this. There's no random encounters in the game. You physically see the enemy in the overworld before it attacks. If you sneak up behind it, you'll get the first attack, but don't expect that to happen too often. It really didn't for me. Another thing to note is once you conquer a dungeon, basically all the enemies in there will run away from you, and if you run into them, then like you don't even enter the battle, you'll just instantly get the EXP. I think it's like that even if you're just like a certain amount of levels higher than them, but still, it's really cool. So how would you get underleveled then in that case? Well, there's a trick to the game, because of the amount of data it can hold at one time on a certain screen, or something to that effect, I don't really know. Say you see an enemy, if you walk off screen far enough, then that enemy might completely despawn when you go back. Now, it's also possible that it'll still be there, or that there will be a different enemy in its place, but that's all you need to know. If you go off screen and you come back, something different might be there. So if you're abusing that throughout the entire game, so you're not getting into any battles besides boss fights, then yeah, you're going to be underleveled, and you are probably going to lose the boss fights. So just don't do that. Anything you see in your path, just fight it. The battles aren't really that hard, so just get over it and fight them. Alright, so can we just talk about the music real quick? So this game has some serious jams, and here are some of my favorite. Onett. Frank. Twoson. Winters. Saturn Valley. The weird drug trip coffee theme. The bus theme. And Summers. Now you may have noticed that I didn't talk about the battle themes at all, and that's because I don't find them to be particularly jammable, if you catch my drift. Now, the battle themes are good in their own right, but not like that. I think you should give them a listen, so you can see what I mean. Otherworldly Foe? Battle against a weird opponent? Battle against a mobile opponent? Sanctuary Guardian? Kraken of the Sea? And I lied, I actually really like this one, it's kinda jammable. And a track that I won't spoil the name of, I think you should listen to this in its full context. Okay, so I really like some of the locations in this game. Onett just feels like a typical small American town, which isn't something that a lot of games do. Also, you can buy this house right outside of Onett. That was definitely owned by a crack addict at some point. Home is home though. Twoson is more of the same, just with more interesting stuff like the preschool and the theater, Berglund Park, stuff like that. Threed is also more the same, except for the zombies, but don't worry about that part. And Winters is really pleasing to take in. No, not just because of the music, even though the music is really good. I just like that it's a snowy area that doesn't suck. I'm looking at you, Route 216. Also, it has Tessie, so it's automatically cool. I have no clue how to explain the drug trip that is Saturn Valley, but it exists. Fourside is a huge city with a dinosaur museum, so it's automatically cool. Also, Moonside is really weird, and that's cool. I like the wackiness of it, I like how it's all inverted colors and stuff, and yes means no, no means yes, that's so cool. And Dolam is literally a floating kingdom. It doesn't get much cooler than that, except for just concept art that shows that it could have been a lot cooler. It always felt really cool to explore these new cities and see what kind of wacky inhabitants you would find, because oh boy, there are some weird ones. Like, here's some of my favorite moments with the NPCs. When you fight the Kraken on the way to Scaraba, the sailor says, "I threw my slippers at the beast." Maybe you didn't notice. He was trying his hardest, man. At one point in the game, you open a drawer and you get an insignificant item. Your guess is as good as mine as to what that is, but I mean, remember when I said I liked the dinosaur museum? Well, this guy helps with that, saying, "Do you know whose bones are on display here?" The answer is your bones, my bones, Bones bones, bone bone bone. And lastly, while it's not an NPC, there is a sign in Fourside, outside of the building, that says that EarthBound 2 is in development. I mean, I guess it was, but remember, it doesn't exist. Don't talk about it. We don't talk about Mother 3. Also, the enemies you fight in this game are really wacky, and I think that just adds to the insanity of the game so much more. Enemies such as the annoying old party man, the insane cultist, and of course, the famous Starman really adds some unique flavor to this game. The bosses are pretty weird too, like, just look at the Plague Rat of Doom, or Master Belch, who later becomes the Big Pile of Puke. Yes, that is his official name, yep. I'm also a big fan of the Kraken, that looks nothing like a Kraken. I just think it looks cool, and has banger music. The next thing is another wacky quirk of this game, but this time it wasn't intentional. If you go to this tent in Threed and start talking to this specific corner, some weird stuff can happen. For whatever reason, this little corner fetches random garbage data and can cause a whole slew of things to happen. Most of the time, you just get weird text, but sometimes it might teleport you somewhere completely random. I've even seen people get teleported to a cutscene within the final boss, which I won't show for obvious reasons. It can open a sort of debug menu and can cause all sorts of graphical glitches as well. Of course, it can also just soft lock the game, so Be warned if you try it. Okay. A lot of people played this game for the first time lately, myself included. I guess they sort of had skewed perceptions about what the game would be like. We've heard a lot of good things over the years about this cult classic, but there are some things in the game that aren't exactly quality of life features. Many people complain about the limited inventory space, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. You have 4 inventories, one for each character, so if you run out of space, I think it's just a good reminder that you should use the items you get. That's why they're there. Other than that, I find the other things that annoy people pretty funny. For example, in order to enter Belch's lair, you have to wait in front of this waterfall for 3 minutes before the door will open. This was a reminder from Shigesato Itoi, the creator of the franchise, more info on him later, to take breaks and maybe get some lunch while you wait. Another infamous thing is the bicycle. You get the bike when you first arrive in Twoson, but it can only carry 1 person, so by the time you get Paula, the bike is completely useless. I get why people would be disappointed, you do walk rather slow in the game, so having faster transportation methods besides teleport would be really nice, but honestly, being slow is kind of the point. You're supposed to take your time, explore each area thoroughly, and talk to the NPCs, see what wacky thing they'll have to say. The game definitely knew what it was doing with the bike, and that's great. The game isn't too serious, except for when it is, and you'll know when it is, but when it's not serious, it knows how to poke fun at itself, and I think that's a good thing for a game like this to have. Oh, and similarly, you can order pizza in the game, and you have to wait 3 whole minutes for it to arrive. I think that's neat. One more thing, again, that I think is really neat, is that if Pooh eats food that isn't from Dalam, he restores less HP from it. Like, you grab a burger out of a trash can, Ness has no problem eating it, but Dalam needs more sophisticated food, I guess. So I think it's about time to talk about how this game came to be. The Mother series was created by a name named Shigesato Itoi, who apparently does a lot more than just video games in Japan. He's apparently really damn good at Monopoly, and is the president of the Japan Monopoly Association. I'm being dead serious. He also made this app that was basically Instagram but for pets. The thing that probably resonates most with you and I, though, as gamers, is that he founded the company Ape Inc. This company was succeeded by Creatures Inc., which is one of the 3 companies that formed the Pokemon Company, those being Nintendo, Game Freak, and of course Creatures Inc. So the thing is, Itoi isn't actually much of a programmer himself. He had all the ideas for this game, but he wasn't good at making a game out of it. In came Satoru Iwata and his people from HAL Laboratory. If it wasn't for them being able to personally program the game, while the Ape crew were working on the game's map and text, it's entirely possible we would have never seen this game, as it had already been delayed before this. While we're on the topic of these famous gaming men, this was actually the very first RPG that Shigeru Miyamoto ever beat, and yeah, he said he liked it, so he's a man of culture, I guess. One fun thing that was added during development was an anti-piracy measure. If the game detected that you were playing a pirated copy, it increased the amount of enemies you'd find tenfold. Since this game was the only one to ever leave Japan for quite a while, I feel it's only appropriate that we talk about the localization process. At first, the game was being localized by a man named Dan Osen, who's responsible for a lot of the phrases we know and love, like say fuzzy pickles. However, he only translated 10% of the script before it was passed on to Marcus Lindblom, who had direct orders from Nintendo to make the game as weird as he wanted, and I'd say he did a good job. Of course, it wasn't translated word for word. In order to make it more suitable for American audiences, he changed quite a few things to make references that Americans would actually get. One Easter egg is that he actually named one of the NPCs in the game after his daughter Nico, which I think is a really great touch. He worked on the translation largely alone, so I think it's only fair that he got that. There were quite a few visual changes from Japan to America as well. An instance of the Coca-Cola logo was removed, references to alcohol were changed to coffee, which really makes you wonder what you're drinking in Saturn Valley. And the happy people were changed to look less like the KKK. Also, Ness was naked at one point in the Japanese version. Yeah, I understand the change there. Well, that's about all I have to say about this great game. Sure, there are a lot of RPGs out there these days that are really inspired by this, but it still holds its own today, so I think you should really try it if you haven't already. Please, do it for me, you won't regret it. But now that we're done, I think it's time we actually put this bad boy in the console. So you're telling me I sold my soul for Rick Astley? That hurts me so much my shirt literally changed colors. Hey, what's up? Hey, it's Alex Guy. By any chance, was it your soul they were selling at that game store? Probably. Why? Yeah, I thought it reminded me of you. I just bought it for research purposes, you know? Not every day you see a soul lying around. Yeah, that's fair. Can't say I've seen one lately. So, what were they selling that you wanted so badly you'd sell your soul? Oh, it was just a copy of EarthBound. Or, it was supposed to be anyway. When I put it in, I got a face full of Rick Astley, so I think they might have scammed me. Dude, you know EarthBound is on Switch now, right? Oh yeah, that's how I played it for the first time. Then why the hell did you sell your soul for it? Oh, you know, I'm just a hoarder. I kind of thought I would eliminate all business on the face of the planet by, you know, just buying everything that everyone sells, and then I would have a monopoly on everything in existence. But it turns out when you're broke, that doesn't really work out so well because I only have one soul to sell. Dude, you're a f***ing idiot. I mean, if you really want, I can give you your soul back since you were scammed and all. No, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. You know, in hindsight, I actually like Rick Astley, so this is a good move on my part.